And good evening, everyone. We appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Hopefully, we have a lot of individuals on this call tonight. My name is Herman White. I am a managing partner of the Holleran Group. We are a Black-owned development firm based here in Denver, Colorado. And our mission is really centered around providing equitable opportunities for all impacted by our decision. This includes our investors, as well as the individuals, families, as well as the communities in which we invest in and serve. One thing that we all know is for certain is change is inevitable. Change is also necessary to evolve. And so each month, we create what we call community think tanks to ensure that we hear from the community. We hear about the needs, the wants, and desires to better inform our decision making. We also have quarterly conversations as forums as such to ensure that we better inform and educate and empower the community to take action and participate in the change that may affect them. Ironically, tonight, we acknowledge one of the worst tragedies that has affected the African American community and has impeded us from moving forward totally as a culture: the Tulsa Race Massacre.
Yeah.
For those that are aware of the Tulsa Race Massacre, it is about the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was one of the most affluent Black neighborhoods in the country early on in the 20th century, so much that it was coined Black Wall Street. It had over 10,000 residents, 300 businesses, over 1,200 homes, a church, theater, bank, hospital, grocery store, and hotel that covered over 36 square blocks within the community. Given the time that this happened, it is simply amazing what they were able to build. But long story short, due to a false accusation of improper behavior of a young Black man toward a white woman and the rise of racial tension at the time, this entire community was destroyed by a white mob, leaving 100 to 300 Blacks murdered in the streets, over 1,200 homes burnt down to the ground, and thousands left homeless, not only resulting in a loss of heritage and a promising future, but financial wealth for many generations to come. So with that being said, and as we acknowledge the tragedy, we also want to honor and pay homage to those countless sacrifices that were rendered in order to move the culture forward. What they built, again, was powerful, it was promising, and it provided hope. So tonight, as we embark on this conversation, and we have an opportunity to spend some time with some amazing individuals. One that I want to mention before we get started is one that has been intimately involved in community engagement for many, many years, and he really needs no introduction. But for many, many years, this gentleman has committed himself to the community of Denver, as well as the state of Colorado. He has been acknowledged in many forums. His accolades could be talked about for hours. He is someone that I personally admire and someone that I look forward to working with in many years to come as well. You can all get to know him a little bit better by reviewing his bio on the Holleran website. But for now, and without further ado, I want to introduce you to Anthony Graves, our moderator for the evening. Anthony.
Herman, thank you so much for the very kind introduction and for your powerful words, reminding us about the incredible tragedy of the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. You know, the great thing about forums like this is that we can look to the past, but then redirect our gaze to the future. And that's what we're really going to do this evening. So welcome to this forum on Black wealth building, sponsored by the Holleran Group. I'm so pleased to be here. You know, as we embark on this timely discussion, and I take a page from Herman's book, when we think about this 100th year anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, you know, to really think about looking back a century ago this week and seeing a thriving economic center eviscerated, right? A shining symbol of Black wealth in America that was burned to the ground. That attack is actually quite symbolic, right? Because The attack on Black wealth and its long road of recovery is not only symbolic, there's a lasting refrain for where we are today. A century later, the Black community is still finding its footing when it comes to building wealth and has suffered through numerous systemic barriers, from redlining trends that have undervalued our real estate portfolios, right, to predatory lending that we're facing today. But despite these barriers and the economic injustices that we have faced and the obstacles known and unknown that persist today, we're looking forward to a brighter future. And we're going to hear from several champions of economic equity in our community and discuss some tips and best practices to build wealth. It's my pleasure to introduce Makisha Booth, Fatima Dickerson, Helma Gentry, Jice Johnson, Shane Phillips, and LaDon Sullivan. They also have very impressive backgrounds and strong community ties. And so I won't read all of their impressive bios, but I still want to give you brief excerpts of each person to give you a sense of who they are and how they show up for our community. First, Makisha, dropping the mic every day. Makisha Booth is the founder and head business coach of SistaBiz Global Network, a business accelerator for Black women entrepreneurs. SistaBiz Global Network helps Black women, solopreneurs, and micro businesses build scalable, sellable businesses. As a rapid improvement coach, Makisha helps small businesses rethink their revenue strategies, brands, systems, resource allocation, and human capital strategies. Welcome, Makisha. We're thrilled to have you. Fatima Dickerson is the part owner of Welton Street Cafe. I can taste the honey hot wings right now. I know you're there with me. You've been there. If not, you need to go. Free commercial. Get a plate while it's hot. Stand in line. It is worth it. And so Fatima was born and raised near the Five Points neighborhood in Denver. She's a 2005 graduate of Denver East High School. Hey, Lolo, right here with you, my fellow angel. And she's really, not only gone to East High School, but she received her Bachelor of Arts in English from Metro State. And she's currently working on a Master's of Social Studies with a concentration on women and gender studies from the University of Colorado at Denver. She is part of a family tradition that has really brought culture, right, and that soul food to the city that we love. So thank you so much for being here. Helma Gentry is the Vice President of Business Banking Relationship and a Relationship Manager at TBK Bank at the Dallas Division. And she focuses on being an SBA lender for Dallas, Texas, and the Metroplex area. She has almost 30 years of SBA lending experience. Her extensive knowledge in lender responsibilities, compliance, and performance standards really continue to be an incredible asset to small businesses. So there's a lot that we can learn from her today. Jice, I'm very excited to share a call with you today. I remember not too long ago sitting down, and she kind of grabbed me and said, "What do you do? What is your role? How are you helping our community?" And I really appreciated that about her, right? And so a bit about Jice. She's an Oakland native, a U.S. Army veteran, mom of 3, and businesswoman out of Denver here. She's graduating cum laude with her master's degree in leadership from Amherst University, and she's worked with small businesses and entrepreneurs to empower them to push past fear and streamline their business systems and practices. She's been recognized for DBJ's top 40 under 40. I could go on and on. Just know that she's a true advocate for the community and wealth building in our community. Shane Phillips. Shane is the Vice President and Senior Commercial Relationship Manager at TBK Bank. Shane started with TBK Bank in the June of 2020, and she has nearly 25 years of experience in banking and financial services. And so as a senior SVP of Colorado Business Bank, he was also responsible for generating commercial and industrial loans. Look, I have been on those loan approval committees, right? And they have tough jobs, and there's a psychology and a process behind the scenes that many of these bankers like Shane follow. So perhaps we'll hear more about that today. Finally, certainly last but not least, LaDon Sullivan. LaDon has racial justice and community leadership in her DNA. The eldest granddaughter of longtime Denver civil rights leader Ruth Denny, LaDon has centered the love of giving back, racial justice in her community and her professional work and personal life. She was with the Denver Foundation for over 23 years. I just like to call her chicken soup for the soul, if we can go there. But just know that with this all-star mix, there is so much for us to talk about. Now, before we go directly to questions, right, in the spirit of looking at the past, I do want to take a quick snapshot of the present before we go right into the future. So here's what today looks like. So 100 years past the Tulsa Race Massacre, here's what the wealth gap looks like for our community today. According to the Center for American Progress, in 2019, the median wealth of Black households in the United States was about $24,000, compared to $189,000 for white households. In short, the typical Black household had about 12.7% of the wealth of the typical white household, right? To give you a couple of other things to consider here as we get the conversation started, the average Black household had $142,000 net worth in 2019, compared with $980,000 for the average white household. And so that means that on average, Black households had about 14.5% of the wealth of white households overall. And so there's an absolute dollar gap of about $838,000 between often our families, right, and that of our white counterparts. Finally, the last thing that I'll say is that the coronavirus pandemic, that exacerbated, right, this divide and created new issues. And so, more than 2/3 or 68.1% of Black families with incomes from $35,000 to $100,000 who lost work during the pandemic indicated that they could not afford all of the food they needed. They faced eviction or foreclosure, had difficulty paying all of their bills, right? And that compares to only 49.3% of white households, right, who experienced very similar difficulties. And so that goes to my first question with you, fabulous panelists. And Fatima, I'd like to actually start with you, going down to Welton Street Cafe. As a restaurant owner, you and your family having a legacy business in food and beverage, we know that had to be a tough period for you to come right through the pandemic. And, we don't even know how you survived that. And so we'd like to learn from you about how you managed the lack of working capital during the pandemic. So what did that look like for you and your family?
Man. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. I think this is an awesome opportunity to learn. So I'm here as a learner, and I have my notebook so that I can write down things because we're here to learn with and from each other. So, and if anyone's ready for the documentary of how Welton Street Cafe survived, come holla at me, because it's one of those things where I still feel like we're running full speed. March 6, 2020, we had our Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives Food Network premiere. So it's just like, yes, we get this national recognition, and then a week and a half later, everything shuts down. And so when you're in a new season, you have to kind of just navigate that storm. So a lot of people had started seeing me a lot, different places. I saw you on the news. I saw you in this paper. I saw you here, because people need to see me. We're still in business. So we started selling chocolate. The world's finest chocolate that the schools have, the dollar chocolate. They called and they said, we have to get rid of all this candy. The kids aren't in school. I said, yeah, bring that chocolate down here. And I remember one of my friends who worked for the city, he saw me with these big boxes of chocolate. And he said, well, what are you doing with all that chocolate? I said, it's for sale. If we can't sell chicken, if they can't afford something and people want to come down and support, this is also for sale. This is going to help pay a bill. This is going to help pay somebody. It was a number of things. We had a lot of people come down and donate. So I'm always grateful for the supporters. I said, if we did not have a huge following, Welton Street Cafe would not have survived this global pandemic, because we actually have survived only on our customer base. We haven't had any kind of government assistance. This is on the strength of our customers that we are here. And so what else did we have going on? Black Lives Matter was huge. That came through because you have people who support the culture. And this is an opportunity for people who've been supporting you to support you, and new people who don't know about your business to support you. In September, I had my mural. in Rhino. So it's 27th and Walnut. That brought a lot of attention, and that was a play on Black Lives Matters as well. In December, we had our Coca-Cola commercial. So you have all of these like media that is putting your business out there. But then on the back end, you're having to do other groundwork and find people who are still essential workers and call them and say, hey, are you guys still in business? What's going on? Can we feed you? Do you need us to cook something that's not even on our menu? On the
Fatima,
menu, we're still going to do it. Mm-hmm.
that's amazing. So just to pare back some of the things that I've heard from you. Oh, I'm sorry. Just to jump in with some of the things that I've heard from you. So first of all, the community has helped to stand you up, right? Given your reputation, as we talk about Tulsa and the Black Wall Street, Welton Street, that's our neighborhood, right? The Five Points community and its history is so important. But beyond this community support, I also heard you talk about the hustle and the pivot, right? Turning over stones maybe that you hadn't turned over before to make it all work. And so I wanted to acknowledge that and actually use that as a point of transition, right? Is that right, Fatima?
Oh, yeah, that's very fair. That's very fair, because you're putting yourself out there because you have to. You're like, what are we going to have to do to be here? Like, I think one of the issues that I see on a daily basis, just from the people that I serve, is we don't even know how to utilize the people in our community. Like, we have everybody here that we need, but do we know how to utilize them a lot of the time? No. And that's this was a clear demonstration. This pandemic really, I did not, knowing that I have a huge like social capital, did not take advantage of what our community can do as a collective during this type of storm.
That's really great. So with that, I'd actually like to tee one up for Jice now. As I listen to the story of Welton Street Cafe, I think about how you were going through this growth trajectory, right? And many businesses actually don't even get to that stage where you were actually on the rise, where they're just trying to cover basic operational expenses, right? Just to get the working capital to survive, pay payroll, but they're not really going through the growth that you started maybe to recognize pre-pandemic. Well, Jice, you've had a lot of experience around access to capital, right? Sources of capital. And so, Jice, I'd love to hear from you for a couple minutes about, how small Black businesses can really navigate the needs of getting the right types of capital at the right time to grow their business, right? To get out of just kind of covering the bills to that growth trajectory that allows them to hire on more staff, build inventory, and grow their client base. Jice?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I have a lot of thoughts around that, because I think a lot of it starts with understanding and our comfortability level with money, right? And so also understanding what types of capital are actually available, and then beginning to think through strategically what types of capital are needed and why. Businesses have to think about, or they have to be okay or comfortable with the idea of growth. And I say that, I want to highlight that because a good portion, almost all of our businesses are single member LLCs and sole proprietorships. And why that matters is because you have to think about growth in a way that allows you to think outside of yourself, right? And so when I talk to a lot of Black businesses, we get things like they don't want to trust partners. They're not quite sure about hiring someone, right? They're thinking about friends and family instead of thinking about people maybe who are most qualified for a role or a position. They haven't thought through organizing their finances really in any way to include outside of, just the basics of an accountant. So really thinking through like financial management, what kind of policies, what kind of procedures need to be put in place in order for your business to run. And then thinking about how you're going to grow it would really be the starting point of what type of capital you're going to need to access.
I think that's so great. So often I think within the entrepreneurship journey, people think about single sources of revenue. They think about the revenue that's coming from the customer, or maybe they're thinking about the one loan that they get from banking or financial institutions, but they're not really thinking about a term we often use in real estate, which is the capital stack, right? So what's the whole portfolio of sources that you can bring in, right, for capital to fund the life cycle and growth of your business? Jice, thank you for that. Do you think there are some underutilized tools within various financial instruments and sources of capital that we should explore more as a community?
Yeah, I do think that there are those, but I think when thinking through how Black businesses need to think about capital, kind of the first thought goes towards debt and loans. We have to be more comfortable with capital. I think part of capital and seeking capital is a confidence level inside of your business. If you are a business that knows that you're thriving and you're a business that sees the opportunity for growth, you are less hesitant to take on a variety of types of capital because you believe in your ability to be successful. And so what I see inside of our hesitancy is also this kind of mindset that I'm not quite sure I'm going to be successful. So if I talk about taking on a loan, the first thing that I get back is I'm going to have to make that payment back, right? I don't know if I can make that payment. That indicates that you have a lack of confidence in your ability to have a thriving business, right? And so when I think about what types of capital or how our capital or our access to capital is underutilized, or even a business seeking capital is really, very underutilized. A part of that goes into a business's ability or a business's belief that they can actually be successful and cover their expenses. And I think that's a good place for, to think about why Black businesses struggle to see themselves in being in places of success. And struggle to see themselves in places that they are thriving, or, where we're really moving beyond a survival mentality.
I love that. I think this is actually a great bridge to go to some of our banking partners on the line. So Helma, I'd love to actually go to you next. I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to be bankable, right? As a client for the bank, what do you really look for when you're investing around the loan approval committee in small businesses?
Bankable. Bankable is a term that lenders use. Bankable means you actually have the ability to repay the loan, just like Jai said. You actually know that you are a company, you know what you need, and then you move forward to obtain those funds. The ability for an individual to obtain a loan depends on several items. Yes, part of it is your credit score. Yes, part of it, if you're a startup, it would be your projections. If you are an existing business, then we would probably be looking more toward your historical financial statements and your tax returns. Bankable, that's bankable. Bankable doesn't mean you have to have a whole lot of money in the bank. Bankable means you just have to be prepared to take on what Jice was saying, to take on the ability to know that every month you have the ability to pay back a loan, because you know that you have 1.15 times the amount of money that you need to do everything that you need to get that loan paid and to pay your bills and your employees. That's bankable.
I appreciate that. And you've actually just bridged something that Jice said earlier. I think, Jice, you were kind of talking about how we package ourselves, right? Being prepared, putting things in order. Helma, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how do we organize ourselves around, approaching a bank to really make sure that our house is in order to be bankable in your eyes?
If our participants will allow me, because I'm the child of educators, I do stuff real simple. So you're coming into a lending institution. A lender wants to know, who are you? Just like Jai said, most folks are sole props or they're LLC, single member. Okay, so we now know who you are. What do you want? I love to know the fact that you have a dream, but a banker can't use that dream to get an underwriter to get your loan through. So I need to know what you need. And I don't want to hear, I need money. The third thing that we would really need to know is, how the heck are you going to pay us back? So there are three things, and I call it SBA 101, that any bank, anywhere needs to know. Who are you? What actually do you need? And how, or what ability do you have to pay that money back to the bank so you can come back and get some more?
Let me probe that for just a moment. So when you say, what do you actually need? Give me an example. So for example, do people need money or do they need employees to be servers at the restaurant? What exactly do you mean when you say, what do you need?
When an owner comes to me, or even a startup for a restaurant, they need money for leasehold improvements, or they need money to purchase a building and do construction. They need money for equipment. They need money for inventory. You can't come into a bank and say, I need working capital. Everybody needs working capital. But what a banker needs to know is, what are we going to use as collateral, if any, to assist you in getting your loan? Again, that portion of what you were talking about, Anthony, that's being bankable again, okay? Because we must know what you have, not just your credit score, what else do you have, in order for us to be able to take you and guide you through the process that the bank has. So you, like other people, maybe not of our same shade, have the ability to get a loan. And a lot of that comes from education.
You know, Helma, correct me if I'm wrong, but I often hear with lending institutions the term sources and uses. So thinking through, you know, how much money you need coming from which entity and how exactly you're going to use every dollar. So if you're getting a $350,000 loan, I think most lending institutions want to know on a line item basis exactly how you're allocating those funds. You know, if 350,000, maybe 100,000 is going to equipment, new stoves, refrigerators, maybe 25,000 is going to inventory. Is that a good overview?
That is exactly what I was saying. They need to know exactly what you need, and not just a rare statement of, I need help. Or when you walk into a bank, they know you need help. When they walk in, they know you want working capital. But if you're a startup, you must be very specific in nature as to what you actually need. Do you need some tables and chairs? Do you need some forks and some knives and some spoons and some napkins? And then, yes, you also need working capital in order to employ individuals in order to make the community better. That's where your working capital needs come in. And that's not marketing. That's working capital needs for your lease, or for your employees, insurance, that type of thing.
That's great. You know, I think this is a good opportunity for us to move on and go to LaDon for a couple of questions. You know, earlier when we talked about really positioning yourself for various types of capital, one of the sources of capital that is not often talked about in these circles is philanthropy and philanthropic dollars. And there is a lot of money out there on the philanthropy side when you have a vision. And so, LaDon, I'd love to hear your voice regarding, you know, what our community needs to know about connecting with philanthropy, leveraging philanthropy, working within the systems of philanthropy to activate the resources and their objectives for investment.
Thanks for that lengthy question, Anthony.
I can make it much more brief if you'd like. I can shrink it down.
I may ask to come back to it.
Sure.
If I start wandering off, bring me back on the road. And I'm so excited to be here with all these folks, very humbled by all this wealth of knowledge that has been shared and will be shared so far. So with that being said, I'll just say one thing about philanthropy that we need to know immediately is that philanthropic institutions are not a monolith. There are several different kinds that have several different reasons why they exist and how they exist in community. So if you've connected with one foundation, you've connected with one foundation. You know, they are all different and they have different ways of working in community. That being said, philanthropy is in an interesting space right now in relationship to all that has gone on with COVID-19. with the escalated racial injustice that we all have witnessed through the murder of George Floyd and unfortunately so many others, where it's very clear that there's a window of opportunity in this current climate, particularly for the African American community, because they're searching for connection, they're searching for opportunities to invest, and they're not exactly clear as to what that looks like. And so the other thing I would say in this moment is that for the Black community, our voices are extremely important, and we should be proactively engaging with philanthropic institutions to ensure that not only that our voices are sharing our input, but that we actually, if at all possible, have our bodies at the table of decision-making, that we're a part of community boards, that we're a part of community engagement processes that are happening right now in this current climate. The other thing I would say as well, again, like I said, there's proactive dollars, and philanthropy is stretching outside of the typical grants to nonprofit organizations and moving into impact investing. That opens itself up to be supportive of other opportunities besides 501c3s or organizations that have nonprofit status. And those dollars.
LaDon, can I actually?
Go ahead, interrupt me.
I'm going to interrupt you there for a moment because you used a very important word there, impact investing. Can you give us a 101 and explain what that means? What is impact investing?
I knew you were going to ask me that question. So I'll just give you from my vantage point, being a part of the Denver Foundation. So we have dollars that we have literally put into a special fund that supports very small interest loans that have very loan-y friendly terms of. So in particular, I can give you an example. The Black Resilience in Colorado Fund has a loan program where we give loans up to $50,000. The terms can be up to 5 years to repay it. The interest cannot exceed 1.5%. Very low a very low, I would say, threshold as far as what people have to provide in order to receive those loans. And they're specifically for Black-led and Black-serving nonprofit organizations for them to be able to, I think as Jice and Helma stated about having to grow their organizations, to purchase a building, to actually create development plans, to expand their space, or for other capital improvements that might be beyond equipment. It could be for unique and upgraded software so that they could actually increase their impact in the community, serve more people, provide more services, or reach a larger span of geography. So that might be the easiest way for me to share as an example. And those organizations pay back over time, and they work in partnership with the foundation. And we not only provide those resources, provide those loans, but we also couple them with assistance from experts that they feel will be most helpful to, the organization feels will be most helpful to them being able to reach their goal of why they borrowed the money in the first place.
Absolutely. The other thing that I didn't hear you yet say is that there are stakeholders and objectives of each philanthropic organization. And so their role in life is to disperse this capital and impact some social issue.
Right.
And sometimes for-profit businesses are actually an instrument that philanthropy can leverage to exact those outcomes. Is that an accurate statement?
It is. So there have been some, some organizations that have received loans that now have been able to expand the number of individuals that they hire within their organization and or in the community, which helps us meet our goal on economic opportunity and impact.
That's exciting. Well, speaking of impact, I'd actually like to go now to someone who's having an amazing impact in our community. Love to go to Makisha with Sister Biz, just to ask her a few questions about how she's impacting her space. So Makisha, we've talked a lot about, sources of capital for small business, and we've chatted a little bit about the realities of, a lack of working capital for small businesses, sometimes not having the infrastructure in place and trying to find the various sources of funding to go after to keep things afloat. What do you think is the typical trajectory for a small business? What are the stages of development that a business ordinarily goes through, and how can we accelerate traversing those stages as a small business?
So the way that we kind of work through phases of business development with our businesses are by first looking at business design. The design element is all about like your business concept, your idea, your value proposition, or the thing that customers will say is the reason why they come to you and would come to you over a competitor, your niche, your revenue streams, your org structure. So really designing the structure and the concept and the idea and testing it and making sure that it works before you invest too much into it and before you approach funders, looking at your vision and mission. And so developing the business from that standpoint, the design of it, the model. And then once you get the model down and you've validated what it is you sell or what it is that you offer, then moving into a place where you can begin to build a brand around it. And you can start to build a digital and other types of footprints around the model that you built and launch the business and get it actually running. And once it's up and running and you have a successful model that's well branded, then you're going to start testing more, running systems and putting things into place so that you can eventually grow and scale the business. Within that process, you're also setting more concrete long-term goals, revenue goals, and core strategies for the business, and looking at all the systems and structures you want to put in place for something more sustainable.
I have the benefit of having met so many of the systempreneurs that you have mentored and coached over the years, right? I see you like sprinkling your magic all over the landscape. And one of the things I've come to understand about your process is that you're also engaged in a bit of psychology with the individuals that you're coaching. So can you talk to me a little bit about some of the mental or psychological barriers that Black business entrepreneurs, right, face, like some of the obstacles that are in their own heads that you help them to get around and over?
So I think Jice really touched on that really well. I want to kind of touch on the fact that some of it's not just in your head, that systemic racism is real, that some of the barriers that they come into entrepreneurship are very real, from workplace trauma that they dealt with in leaving mainstream America to the barriers that they deal with in terms of the wealth gap and the credit gap that have nothing to do with anything they've done. They're all about the inequities in the system and policies and systems and that continue to perpetuate the fact that when they enter entrepreneurship, they are not entering at a level playing field as Black entrepreneurs. And so it's important to note that that trauma is real, that reality is real, the fact that they have a steeper road to travel as Black entrepreneurs is real. And I never want to deny that. And I know Jice does, and she works with on this work in our community all the time. And so looking at, investors, bankers, philanthropists, developers, community leaders, politicians, I really want to make that note that first and foremost, the entrepreneur is dealing with the fact that that group of stakeholders has a lot of work to do to dismantle the barriers that they face when they enter into entrepreneurship. And so there is that. And then you still got to get up, and you still got to keep going, and you still got to move past it as an entrepreneur. And so when I start thinking about the mindset work that they need to do on building a successful business, that's where we start to work on, like, yes, I know all of these barriers exist, and you still can do this, you still can make it. And so let's envision scale for you. Let's envision what growth looks like. Let's envision that you're not doing everything yourself. Let's envision that somebody did write the right size check for you to be able to grow something that is not just a job, but a legacy and an asset for your family. And so having those conversations is the type of mindset work that we do with our entrepreneurs, but it is rooted in very real racism.
I really appreciate that you talked about that. There's no denying, right, the barriers that structural racism creates for Black entrepreneurs, right? And really the trauma. I appreciate that you use the word trauma, that there is real work to be done and getting through those scarring experiences But the fact that you're really focused on the vision, right? The future, moving forward, working through those issues, right? Tackling those obstacles one at a time, but never stopping, right? Never arresting your forward progress. Even if it's 1 inch at a time, it is still momentum that you're building in your business. And I think that you've done that brilliantly with your clients. So with that, I think this is a great time for us to take a pause and to hear from some of our guests who have been watching this forum, and to give you an opportunity to raise questions for our esteemed panelists. Should I go to Herman or Erica to open it up for questions?
Yeah, I know we had one question that came in and it looks like Jice answered it, but Jice, could you maybe speak a little bit more about a business plan and how to build one?
So what I will say is that I think a significant amount of our businesses probably don't need a plan. They probably need to really develop a business model. But in all cases, I simply offered that the Black Business Initiative is available to help businesses put those things together. So I dropped in some information if you're looking for additional information. All those business, every business is different. And if you need a business plan, it really needs to be tailored to whatever it is that your goals are. So whether that's funding, whether that's investment, whether that is you needing a roadmap to make sure that you're staying on track as you're thinking about how to grow and scale your business. All of those things can be wrapped up inside of a business plan, and they look different based off of what your needs are.
That's great. Any other questions in the chat? I don't see anything new at the moment. All right, go ahead.
I did have a question I wanted to answer. Not really a question, but you pushed LaDon to define what impact investing is, but you mentioned a capital stack and you didn't actually clarify what a capital stack is. But I think that's important when we're thinking about capital. Did you want to
jump right? Yeah, please do. And you can also jump in here because I'm sure you have your own answer. So it's really important to understand that there are lots of different colors of money, right? We even, for example, when we heard from Helma and then we heard from LaDon. So LaDon had like a 1.5% interest rate, right, on money that might come from a special fund within the Denver fund, as an example. I guarantee you that anything that Helma has to offer, even at her best rates, is not going to be at 1.5%. Helma, just jumping in here, can you give us a sense of the interest rate range from, say, excellent A+ credit to maybe like C credit and the types of interest rates that you might expect in this economy?
Well, I would also love for Shane Phillips to also jump in here too, because he's my cohort in crime. But just letting you all know, for the SBA lending side of the world, you're always looking at prime plus 2.75. That's basically what you're going to see.
Really quickly, what is
prime being 3.25%? Yeah, prime being 3.25% plus a spread that the bank is allowed to use in order to make money. That spread can range from LaDon's 1.25, just basic loan, or all the way up to my prime plus 2.75. But Shane also does commercial lending, and I'd love for him to jump in here real quick.
Shane?
Yeah, thanks, Helma. Yeah, so a couple of thoughts as I've listened to our panelists, and I'm still glad to be a part of this tonight. One thing has not come up that I think is vitally important, and that is a relationship network. So, it's one thing to walk into my branch or to Helma's branch and ask for a loan. It's another thing when Herman calls me and says, Shane, I need you to meet with this lady. She's got a great business, okay? And, so if we go to the comments on systemic racism from Makisha, I totally agree, right? And the problem is the network going back 300 years has not included people of color, right? Just really in the last maybe 2 or 3 decades, right? Have people of color really been involved in the banking and the finance system? And so I would say one of the most important things that we as a group can do that will be a legacy to our kids and our grandkids and their success. Because remember, wealth building is multi-generational. It's not just one of us hitting the lottery and buying a Ferrari. It's, do my kids have a better life than I had? And do my grandkids have a better life than my kids had? The most important thing we can do is build that network. And so, Fatima, I'm going to put you on the spot. With
This
Welton
is a
Street
perfect
Cafe,
conversation and an opportunity.
did
Welton Street
you
Cafe. And that
did anybody tell you about the restaurant relief program, and were you able to apply for it?
So there's a lot of conversation that I can't have on camera.
Sure.
About,
okay.
About that conversation. So we knew about a number of things, but what you said about the network is a critical piece. Like Welton Street Cafe has been the institution where network happens, you know, for people to get access to each other. Like one of the questions that I have right now is like, yes, listening to the presentation, but for the average Black person, how do they even get there? And it is through the network. It is who you know. And so if I'm not in the position to be like connected because of Welton Street Cafe, how do we get our people connected? And that is a huge piece about what Black wealth means for me, what Black wealth means for my family, is being connected. Welton Street Cafe is the family, and the family is the business, you know? So that's a huge element to Black wealth, is making sure that network is generational. And that is something that we have done here in this business.
I appreciate both of
I
the
don't know
points that you've
that-
raised. I think that was an excellent answer. I'm sorry,
I'd like
Shane,
to
did I
correct
cut you
some
off?
information.
Go
Oh.
right ahead.
No,
I'm sorry,
I
go
was
ahead,
done.
Shane. Okay.
Well,
I'd like to correct some information when you are done.
I'm done.
Yeah, very respectfully, I would argue how long the Black community has been in the banking industry. The Black community's first kind of stab at reparations, and I'm gonna use that word very loosely in this case, was the Freedmen's Bank, which was created immediately following slavery. Black banking has been established since we've been off the plantation. And the nepotism, essentially, that you're referring to is part of that system that keeps Black people from accessing capital. And while I wholeheartedly agree on the importance of social capital and networking, like hugely agree on that, it opens up doors, that access is important, but also when we're thinking about why we're in a lot of the situations that we're in, it's not from a lack of Black banking, it's from an extraction of Black wealth through the banking system that has been placed into white communities. And so when you go back, you can go back decades and decades and decades and find Black banks that have been opened and established that had no support, that had no access to the safety nets that banks currently have today or had back then. You can also find that lending wasn't happening. So this lack of access to capital in the Black community has been there since Black banks have been established. And so what has happened is that Black people have deposited money into these banks and have not been able to access loans for some of the same 5 C's that we've discussed today: access to collateral, access to credit, and so on and so forth. And then those dollars have been extracted outside of the Black community, have been lent to white communities in order for them to build. So it's a very interesting thought that essentially what Black people need to do in order to have better access to capital is to be more sociable. I think we need to really be very clear to address the systems that have locked us out from being able to access the capital that we need in order to build our businesses without undermining how important social capital is.
I want to
Joyce, I'm gonna,
really quick.
sorry, go ahead, Makisha.
I'm sorry, I just want to co-sign on that because that's what came to mind for me when we're having this conversation, and why I said in my previous conversation, I know you said that one thing was missing, we haven't talked about social capital, but technically, when I think about, like I said before, investors, bankers, philanthropists, developers, government officials, all the people who control the resources, all of that is rooted in systemic racism, racism and relationship-based systems that we are shut out of. So absolutely, it was brought up and it was included in that work. And I really do understand the value of social capital, and I understand why you would tell an individual how important it is for them to get collateral. But then on the same side of that, we heard the stats on the front of the panel that the wealth gap and what home ownership rates look like. And so, when we are anchoring our advice in racist systems and structures, it makes it very difficult for us to change the stats and the numbers. It does give an individual who wants to fight the system a pathway out, an uphill pathway out, and can get out. But the reason why the stats look the way they do, and not the anecdotes, but the stats and the data and the gaps look the way they do, is because we keep having this conversation from the end of the Black entrepreneur making changes in their world in a system that is not built for their success.
I'm going to jump right in on the tail end of that and then begin to reorient our conversation to give each of you some closing thoughts and advice to entrepreneurs who are watching this. This is a brilliant discussion. Jice, when you talk about extraction, and again, Makisha, when you talk about structural racism and the barriers and the control of the systems that control access, right, to capital, those are all real issues. I think it becomes particularly acute when you start to think about macroeconomics and monetary policy. And really, there's a finite amount of capital in the environment, right? So if you take capital out of one area and you pull it into the other, that's still a finite amount of capital that's moving over, right? And giving those resources to other communities or having enhanced access to individuals or institutions that don't face the barriers that Black and other kind of BIPOC communities face. And so I appreciate you all raising those issues and encourage you to think about the bigger picture that really it's tough when you have a large amount of capital being siphoned into other areas and do not have access because of institutional barriers. So as I said at the very beginning, this panel is about the future, right? So we recognize that we face incredible challenges, and there are numerous solutions that we have to work on together. We absolutely need to work on systemic and structural change, for sure, right? That's done through legislative process, through the way that we influence elected officials, the legislative branch of government, et cetera. But then there's also building social capital, of course, which is also what this event is about, right? Sharing information, growing our networks, group economics, helping one another, sharing our own capital, investing in one another. It's educating ourselves about the various instruments available, the different sources of capital within capital stack, right? Different interest rates, different sources of capital. Sometimes it's friends and family. Sometimes it might be the SBA or a commercial banker or philanthropy. But it's also about, recognizing that we're all in this together. And so I'd actually like to give each of you the closing word to offer a brief statement of advice to individuals that are navigating, right, these structural barriers, or who do not yet have all of the information they need or the relationships at their disposal to move past this barrier that they cannot see beyond right now. So I'll give Makisha the first word for a brief bit of closing advice.
In closing advice to business owners?
Yes.
So my closing advice to business owners is just to not give up and to continue to seek out resources and a support system on your entrepreneurial journey, to continue to build and pursue mastery in entrepreneurial skills. So study the art of entrepreneur and science of entrepreneurship. And so those are a couple of my pieces of advice. And the mindset piece, really start to dream big and don't be afraid to go into detail about what that big dream looks like.
Thank you so much. Fatima?
Some closing advice. This conversation, there's so many pieces to touch on, but I will say that we need each other. So whatever that looks like, however that looks like, buy Black, support Black, that has been a critical piece to Welton Street Cafe, is that we are in business because Black people support Welton Street Cafe. And I have to stress that mindset and making sure that narrative about why we support each other is clear. Like one statement that needs to die is, this is why I don't support Black businesses. We got to kill that because it is hurting our community. We know the barriers that we're already presented with every single day, faced with every single day. And so if we don't support one another, who will support us? So I will definitely make sure I say that, to find a way to support your other Black businesses, because we are all in it together, for sure.
And I will tell them to take those meetings of support to Welton Street Cafe and have the honey hot wings. I'm going to leave it right there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go to Helma.
Thank you.
Helma?
One thing that I really want a business owner to remember is, if you do walk into that bank and they don't treat you well, don't take it personally. That wasn't the bank for you. That wasn't the relationship for you. I also want you to just remember something that I'm saying: educate yourselves. Whether we are mistreated or whether we are allowed to access the funds that we need to know what we need in order to get through the door and get it approved. So I'm asking that you educate yourself for the processes in those lending institutions around you, or go to these individuals here, or go to the small business administration in your area, because there are a lot of small business development advisors who are willing to help and assist small business owners. That's what their job is for. So again, my thing is, educate yourselves and have a thick skin.
Thank you, Helma. And just one quick note. As a reminder, I love that Helma said that it just was not the lending institution for you. There are so many lending institutions out there. And so just know that there are many sources for capital, and you might have several doors slammed in your face, but there are a lot of doors to knock on that you've not yet seen. And so keep going there. Let's go to Jace.
I don't have anything additional to add to kind of the advice for entrepreneurs, right? Strengthen your mindset, grow your knowledge base, certainly grow your social capital. So I'll take my last thought to assert that if we're thinking about the future, I think we've got to move past asking the Black community to assimilate. And we've got to think about repair, and we've got to think about transformation. And those two things are very different. Repair is fixing something that's been done, and transformative is ascending where what the baseline looks like. So when Norman asked in the comments, what are the biggest changes that we can make culturally as a community to bridge gaps, considering the institutions of racism that we face? I think the first change that we have to make is to stop asking Black people to assimilate. It is not our responsibility to try to fit into the systems that have not been created for us or for our good. And I think we have to think about, one, how to repair damage that has very clearly been done, and then how do we change the landscape going forward so that we're not in a constant cycle of restoration.
Thank you, Jace. That's powerful. Building our own structures, right? Standing alone and being unapologetic about it as well, right? Very good. Let's go to Shane.
Thank you. So I guess my closing thought is the door at TBK Bank is open. Last year, during all of the social unrest, it was popular for big companies to write checks to Black Lives Matter and to other organizations. And instead of writing a check, our CEO, who's white, put out a video to all 1,200 of our employees. And he said, "I never knew what white privilege was until it was explained to me." And from there, he created the Diversity and Inclusion Council, of which I'm a part of. And we have two mandates, and Helma's helping implement in Dallas. And one is to, how do we lend more in communities of color? And how do we hire and promote more? And so, hearing that we need to make a shift, our organization has made that shift. And anybody that's listening to this call, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you have a dream for a business, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 2 years from now, start building your network with us now, because I'll help you get there if you've got the passion to do it.
Thank you, Shane. And LaDon, let's go to you for the last word before wrap up.
Sorry. So I would say this, the entrepreneur space is not typically my lane, but it is a part of the greater community, and particularly the Black community. And I would say this, we started this conversation in talking about the recognition of the Tulsa Massacre 100 years from today. And though the horror of that 18-hour period and 100 years subsequently that has followed, there are roots within the Black DNA that remain resilient and true to who we are. They did not form that community and have the prosperity, not just in financial wealth, but I would say in respect and a value system in which they lived, had it not been for who we are as Black people, of how we have always pulled together, how we have always supported our own. Fatima spoke about how the community came not just to purchase wings, but to literally give dollars and find other ways to support. And I often talk about the 5 T's, which is true to the DNA of the Black community. We give our time, we give our talent, we give our treasure, we give our testimony, and we give our social ties. And that has been a resilient thread in the fabric of our community. We need to lean into that. We need to, if we need to dust it off, wash it, whatever we need to do to ensure that it's at its vibrant brilliance that it always has been, we need to lift that up and sew ourselves together. Because this revolution and the liberation of the Black community is not going to be given to us by white-centered institutions, systems, or practices. It's going to be literally, I would say, forged by who we are as a collective people. That's been true in how we operate and give to one another. That's the spirit of Black philanthropy, the love of humankind. We have it in spades, no pun intended, in the Black community. And so I just encourage everyone, no matter what your lane is, whether you be an entrepreneur, an activist, an educator, a liberator, that remains true in how we are tied together.
I really appreciate that sentiment. Well, I just have to say I've been so moved by your cumulative contributions today. All of your voices have been so important in this dialogue, and you've given our audience so many kernels, right, to take away. The one thing that I wanted to leave our group with is an understanding that if you look back 100 years and say, 110 years, when the Tulsa community was thriving, right, when Black Wall Street was at its peak, that success started with one person and one idea, and it connected to another person with shared values, and a community grew around it. And people poured in the 5 T's that LaDon is talking about, right? But effectively, the community came together. And today we still have an opportunity to make history, right? And rebuild again, and to extend ourselves and our talents to one another to create something meaningful and lasting in our community to stem the wealth divide in the United States. And so I'd like to thank the Holleran Group for bringing us together today so that we could have this dialogue to talk about the Black wealth gap, right? And strengthening the ties that we share with one another. It's been a privilege to moderate this forum, and I look forward to connecting with all of you in your respective spaces. Herman and Erica, I'll hand it to you.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. I really appreciate that. I know there were a couple of questions from the audience that didn't get answered. In the essence of time, I will try to get, if you can put your email addresses into the chat, we will definitely get you a response from some of these experts on this call. But again, really, really appreciate the dialogue. I just want to say thank you to all the panelists on the phone today for giving your time today, right? No one's getting paid for this. You guys are passionate about your skill sets, the community, and give back. So we really appreciate you, as well as our esteemed panelists, moderator, for the great dialogue and substance today. I hope that each and every one that joined this call can take something away from it. I do have one shameless plug, as well as a brief on what's at stake before we get out of here. For many of you guys, you know my partners, Norman Harris, Ty Hubbard, as well as Erica Wright. They have worked tirelessly for at least the last decade to create a Juneteenth celebration that is second to none. They've revitalized our community. They've given us all something to be proud of again. And I definitely want everyone here to support their efforts this year. Juneteenth will be held on June 18th through the 20th of this year. If time permits, please come out, fellowship, reconnect with old friends, create some new ones. And again, we'll love your support to continue to pay homage to those that have sacrificed so much for the freedoms that we endure today. In addition, many of you may or may not be aware of Holleran Stake and the Park Hill Golf Course redevelopment project. To be very, very transparent with everyone on this phone call, we are co-owners. We are co-developers on the property. But make no difference about it. We are also natives of this community. We know the history of this community. We lived it. We're a part of it. And so this project is very personal to us. And right now, the Park Hill Golf Course is going through a process right now to see what this can be for the actual community. Now, it is 155 acres. With those that don't understand that type of acreage, that is 140 plus football fields. It's a large enough space to accommodate a large park, but it also can address some of our critical needs that we know we need and we deserve to have within Northeast Park Hill. From including things such as affordable housing, fresh, healthy food, youth development infrastructure, as well as economic investments in regards to businesses and job creation. Now, there are a few individuals that seek to utilize this space otherwise, or simply to leave it as it is today, right? But we don't feel that that would benefit the community as a whole. In fact, we feel like it will speed up gentrification even more so. So for those of you on this call that live in this community, that work in this community, are from this community, please let your voice be heard. Let us know exactly what you want, what you feel this community deserves, and what you would like to see this community be. Whether it's in community engagement meetings, whether it's in registered neighborhood organizations, or the citywide steering committee meetings. Please be heard, be seen, have a voice, and protect that voice and empower yourself to be that voice. Again, the Holleran Group, as well as our partners and Westside investment partners, are committed to getting this thing done right. Not only for our investors, but for our mothers, our fathers, our aunts and uncles, our nieces and nephews, as well as the wealth of cousins that we have and extended family and friends throughout this neighborhood. We deserve more. We deserve better. And we are truly in this together. So we thank you for joining tonight. Have a great evening and God bless.